there's only the vagina, so even though we see the labia majora, we see the labia minora here, the only thing we really have to worry ourselves with is knowing that those structures are the vagina. Remember, if you appropriately name something that's tagged, I'll still give you credit, but you're only responsible for that. As we look here at the top of the vagina, we can see the opening for the urethra right there. Okay, so the urethral opening right through there. And we'll go ahead and we'll give it a color, make it a little bit easier to see. The next opening that we see just below there is going to be the vaginal canal. And again, remember, even if that part of the vagina is tagged, it's still just vagina. So you don't have to worry about giving any of the other details. Why? I have no idea. Okay, here we see the bulbous spongiosus muscle, which we're going to remove. And as we do that, up under it, we can see those glands that we talked about yesterday. The one at the very bottom is the actual gland itself, which is known as the Bartholin's gland or the greater vestibular gland. The portion that's just above it is the bulb of the vestibule. That's only important to note just to make sure that you don't confuse it with Bartholin's gland itself. Okay, sorry, I just want to turn my phone off. It's hard to turn your phone off when you got a bunch of kids. Keep getting all these messages. Got a bunch of them. Got 4 of them.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they're so cute. They're so cute. It's ridiculous.
You should bring them one day.
I should. I bring them here every once in a while. Yeah, every once in a while I bring them. But we're actually not supposed to bring kids to campus, so I'm not really allowed to do it. So I have to do it on my days off.
You have all daughters, right?
I have 3 daughters and 1 son. Yeah.
Is he the youngest?
He's the 3rd. Yeah, 3rd out of 4. Yeah. So this area that we see inferior to the vagina but anterior to the rectum is that perineal body. Yesterday when we were looking at the model itself, we just saw an area of tissue, but that area still represented the perineal body. On the cadaver table, we can actually highlight it and make it a little bit easier to see. We're going to get rid of this membrane through here, and as we do that, we can see that the superficial transverse perineal muscle is right there, and we can see the association with that perineal body. But that's not on our list, so we're going to remove that and reveal the deeper structure, which is going to be the deep transverse perineal muscle, and that one is on the list, so we do have to be aware of that one.
How will we be able to tell whether it's superficial on the table?
Well, first off, for the list itself, since you only have the deep, I would only tag the deep.
Okay.
The one that has the model, I just turn it around over to the back side and tag it from behind, and then you can actually see that it's the deep as opposed to the superficial. So again, the other structure we would see right here, but we don't see, would be that suspensory ligament of the clitoris or the fundiform ligament. Remember, that would be going from the pubic symphysis essentially to the dorsum here. And then really the fundiform portion would be like a little bit deeper. But again, they kind of run together, and a lot of atlases will even name them together. So whether you call it fundiform or suspensory ligament, I don't really care. You will notice on the cadavers we don't see it, which means I can't tag it, okay? Any questions about any of these external structures? Don't forget the urogenital triangle or urogenital diaphragm is essentially all of the space. This is the urogenital triangle, but the diaphragm would also can include that portion of the rectum. Remember, I told you on test day, I'm not going to outline a triangle and say what is this area or anything like that. So again, I'm pointing it out so you know it for lecture, but not necessarily for lab. Now, as we look inside the pelvic inlet, we can immediately see the bladder, all right? I'm gonna go ahead and cut the bladder and all the tissue there in half so that we can see it from the inside. Now, when we do that, we can see the bladder itself, but we can also see inside of the bladder. And we said that inside the bladder, we had what was known as the detrusor muscle. So inside the bladder is the detrusor muscle, but remember the outside, if this were tagged here, we would just call it the bladder, or urinary bladder would be better. Right through here, we can see the opening of the urethra. So there is the female urethra, and we can note that it's very short in comparison to the male urethra, which is actually very long. You may or may not be able to see, but right on the outside of the urethra, let me see, right through there is the urethral sphincter muscle. Remember, we said that there is a deep and there is, there's an internal and external urethral muscle, but your list only says urethral sphincter, so that's all we have to worry about for our test, okay? But again, boards doesn't care about what we test you on in your lab, right? So you have to know that there's an internal and external as well. When you guys take your genitourinary class, you'll go into more depth and detail.
Is a sphincter considered a muscle?
Uh-huh,
Okay.
yep.
So if you were to tag that, would it be like, what is this muscle?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Or I may not say anything. I might just put a dot there. and let you figure it out.
I guess I ask because you can like, kind of, if it's cut that way, it could be confused with the urethra a little bit.
Yeah, if I tag the urethra, I'll use the model.
Okay.
Yeah, the urethra is very easy to see on the model, and there's no confusing what it is. And really, even the sphincter, I'll probably tag on the model too, because you can see very clearly it's very red, and it's right around the end of the urethra, so there's no question what it, well, I guess there is questions. But you should know what it is, let's put it that way. I need to stop saying there's no question, of course it's this, of course it's that. I didn't know it was that when I was taking the class. So again, any questions about the bladder? Very simple, very straightforward. Detrusor, bladder, urethra, and then the sphincter urethra. Okay? Now the next thing that we see right through here is the vaginal canal. Okay? Vaginal canal is going to lead all the way up until we come to the uterus right here. Okay, so the uterus right through there. Now there's sort of a characteristic shape that we want to see, and let's see if we can get it. Yeah, there it is. Right there. Okay, let me clear my drawing. Do you see that opening right there at the base there of the uterus? It's right there, bless you.
Thank you.
Right there. That is the cervix, okay? This area through here would be the body of the uterus, and then this area here kind of at the tip would be the fundus of the uterus. And remember, you have to say of the uterus when you're doing that. Now, the layers of the uterus we can sort of see, but not really. Okay, so remember that outer layer. I'm just gonna draw it so we can see it for perspective, but I don't typically tag this on the test from the cadaver. I tag it where we can see the tissue change in the model. So again, here, this outer layer where we would see the blood vessels, here is gonna be that perimetrium. And then the next area that's gonna be a little thicker, okay, it's gonna be a bit thicker, will be that myometrium. So the thicker layer. And then we get to the layer that's just the innermost layer through here, which is gonna be that endometrium. And yesterday we saw those little columnar-like cells that were associated with it.
And that's what sheds during a period?
Yes. Yeah, so that lining is one of the things that builds up, and then it also sheds and washes away at the end of the cycle. Okay, through there. Okay. Again, remember with the layers of the uterus, I'll ask that on the model. So again, I'm just showing you that for perspective. Okay, so let's take a look. Let me see, where do we want to go from here? Let's go to the fallopian tube. Let's put everything back, turn it back to anatomical position. Okay. So yesterday, remember we said kind of the anterior portion of the uterus where the fundus is, we had the fallopian tube, but we also said that we wouldn't name it the fallopian tube. Instead, we said we would be a little more specific and call it one of four things. Okay. The very tip right through here, and it's going to be very close, okay, together, but that very tip right through there would be the fimbriae. We said the area just above it, right there, would be the infundibulum. We said as we get to this enlarged area that kind of turns a corner is going to be the ampulla. And then the rest of the tube itself is the isthmus. So again, there's four sections through there. So the fimbriae is sort of at the end. Remember we said it had those finger-like projections, okay? It's like calling the ovary to it, come to me, come to me, okay? Little gentle voice, all right? And then right above the fimbriae, that's where we get to the infundibulum. Okay, it's very close. And then the ampulla is going to be where we see the curve. Everything else is the isthmus. Now, the ovary itself is actually encased in a lot of different tissues. One of the tissues is the broad ligament itself, but it's also attached via the ovarian ligament. So let's find that. Oh, it's not Oscar. No, jeez. Okay, we'll just go ahead and add both of those. We'll add the suspensory ligaments as well. We'll put the ovary back on there. Okay. So if we look right through here, we can see a little bit closer towards where the cervix is going to be. It's not near the cervix, but going towards that direction. We have this structure right through there, which is going to be the ovarian ligament. So let's give it a little color, make it a little easier to see. It's right there. So the key for that is going to be recognizing where it's at and what it's connecting to, because it looks very different on some of the models and it looks very different on some of the cadavers. So the key is just going to be that it's not this thing. So the ovarian ligament is only going from ovary to the uterus, but the fallopian tube obviously has all those 4 different areas. And then don't forget, there's also that round ligament, right? So let's take a look at that, see what that looks like, because it's in that same general area. So very close in that same area. Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know you could do that. Whee! Sorry. Oh. So again, the round ligament of the uterus, or the ligamentum teres uteri, is going to come off in that same general area, but the big difference is going to be that it's going to disappear into the deep inguinal ring on the model. But on this, we can see it actually passing through the inguinal canal as it goes down and anchors down to the pubic bone. Now, the suspensory ligament was what we said we couldn't really see yesterday. Inside the suspensory ligament, we would see the ovarian artery and the ovarian vein. But again, we're not going to see those structures here today. We could if we wanted to, but we're going to use the table for suspensory ligament. We'll use the model for the arteries.
Is that the psoas that's running on top of, or what is that?
Yeah, right through there. Yep, so as major. All right, let's look posterior. Oh, I gotta edit. Uterus sacrum. So as we look back here, we can see the uterosacral ligament connecting from the uterus itself and then going back to the actual sacrum through there. Okay. And I'm going to add the rectum in just so that we can see how it wraps around the rectum itself, just for perspective. Okay. And so yesterday we kind of pointed out that structure and we sort of mentioned it, and we even kind of showed where it was at on one of the models, but I told you I wouldn't tag it on a model. I told you I would tag it here because you can clearly see it's attached to the sacrum. So if you missed that, that's on you. The other one's kind of like, it's iffy because you don't see any of the other stuff. But. Any questions about that uterosacral ligament? Let's take a look at the broad ligament. And remember, the broad ligament itself is this very thick covering that's going over the uterus, but then also it's going over the fallopian tube. All right, so collectively, all of this structure right through here is part of the broad ligament. So let me just give it a color for a second just so we can see it. Of course, it's on both sides. The real difference is going to be if it's covering the actual uterus itself, which we see right here. This would be that mesometrium. Okay, so mesometrium. And then we said if it was covering over the fallopian tube, like right here, that would be the mesosalpinx. So mesosalpinx. We said that there's also another covering called the mesoovarium, but we said we wouldn't see it, and we won't. Let's see, that went really fast. There must be more. What did I
That's
miss?
it.
Oh.